Welcome to IAGEN Six Sigma Project Charter Module. This module can be taken as a part of the Six Sigma Yellow Belt program or as a standalone. What is a charter? A written grant by the stakeholders, by which a project is created and its rights and privileges defined. The first step in a Six Sigma project is the project charter. It is the guide map for the entirety of the project. It serves three critical purposes. First, it provides the why, or the need to do this project, the why being an organizational priority or a KPI. It determines the scope. Third, it provides validation and refinement. Six Sigma Project Charter is not a static document. It is a living document, which means, as you discover more, you narrow the scope. You refine the charter and make it reflect the updated direction, and at the same time you get validation from the stakeholders. To understand how to make a project charter, you must first understand all the activities done in the define phase and all deliverables expected. Let's first look at all the activities to be carried out in the define phase. First, stakeholder analysis, then, making a project team, making a high-level process map, making a business case, problem and goal statement, collect baseline data and set a target. Do a COPQ estimate, define process boundaries and process scope along with the timelines of the project, identify CTQ and defect and their requirements, make a financial estimate and finally make a charter and get it approved. Next, let's look at the deliverables needed at the define tollgate. Process maps, stakeholder analysis, WIOZ collected and translated CTQs, COPQ estimated, primary secondary metrics, established project charter closed and approved, project plan phase report. A project charter has 8 different sections. These sections are, Customer CTQ, where we mention the customer CTQ that will be improved, Problem Statement, which defines the defect and states why the project should be done now, Project Scope, which defines the boundaries of the project, Goal Statement, where the improvement is quantified in magnitude and a time frame is mentioned, Baseline, which is the current status of the metric to be improved, Team Details, Project Schedule, where the timelines for each stage are mentioned, and Business Case, which is the financial justification or the benefits to be gained by the project. The problem statement is a precise statement linked to the VOC, using the CTQs as units, which gives the definition of the problem or business concern. The problem statement is precise and there are pointers of what it should and should not have. It should have CTQs, for example, the client states in their VOC that the queue time is very high against specification of 6 minutes. CTQ drill down using CTQ tree may identify 2 variables, the average queue time, or the proportion of intervals in a day above 6 minutes. Next is, overview of the defect. The overview of the defect is the defect as defined by the client. For example, the client had mentioned that the queue time is high against a specification of 6 minutes. A defect in this case will be any interval with a queue time above 6 minutes. A problem statement should have the scale of the defect. The scale of the defect is its magnitude against the specification. For example, in the same example, if 75% of the intervals have queue time above 6 minutes, then we state this scale against the client specification, which might be that 90% of the intervals must be below 6 minutes. Next is, affected location or group. This gives the affected process. For example, in our problem the impact is happening in the customer service queue. Next, urgency of the project. The urgency states why it is important to work on the project now. It could be a gain or a risk. In our example, it is important to work on the problem because queue time has a 60% impact on CSAT and high queue time will adversely impact CSAT. Next, what are the things a problem statement should not have? The problem statement should not contain a proposed solution. For example, in our queue time project do not mention that increasing staffing is the solution. The goal statement, or the goal to be achieved, should not be mentioned here, because it is given in the goal statement. There are 4 elements of the problem statement. Overview of the defect. For example, queue time, turnaround time, intervals above 6 minutes. The defect overview is a description of the defect that has been identified for improvement. Defect requirements, for example. 50% of the intervals are defective. 60% of the intervals have turnaround time higher than expected. The defect requirements give the magnitude of the defectives. Where's the defect? For example, queue time is a concern in the customer service process, TAT is defective in the claims process. This gives an idea of the process or the location where the defect is happening. Urgency for the project. For example, defective queue time intervals have a CSAT which is 60% lower than the normal intervals. High TAT is leading to financial loss for the client due to late payments. The urgency gives the financial or strategic reasons for doing the project now. Let's construct a problem statement step by step. Step 1. Overview of the defect. Describe the defect that has to be improved. High queue time. Defect requirement. Provide the magnitude of the defect. High queue time is seen in 75% of the intervals. Next, location. State the impacted process or department. High queue time is seen in 75% of the intervals, in the customer service department. Finally, urgency. State the urgency of doing the project. High queue time is seen in 75% of the intervals, in the customer service department. High queue time has a 60% impact on CSAT. This project needs to be started now to help improve CSAT. What is a project scope? A project scope statement will define the boundaries of the process the project will improve. It will also define the groups which are involved, and the departments which are in, or out of scope. A project scope will describe which steps are involved. For example, existing customers are included, however, new customer intake is excluded. We have to ensure that the project scope is appropriate. Projects with appropriate scope proceed quickly. When is a project scope managed? First and most importantly, during project assignment. When a project is first assigned, it is very important to clearly define the project scope. Teams, timelines, etc. are determined by it. Next, in the early define phase. In this part, project scope creep can happen. Stakeholders and teams can blur the boundaries of the project, if they are not guarded in the initial part of the project. During the project. The project charter is a live document, and iterative changes are made as the project progresses. These changes made midway in a project, however, may be difficult to incorporate. Determining a project scope. Determining the project scope begins with the first stage of define, when VOC, CTQ, defect definition, and data stratification is done. Next, the project scope is refined. Once we understand the defect that has to be improved and its components, we refine the boundaries of the project. The problem statement, identifying the process which is causing the defect, how much improvement to make and timelines, all help in defining the boundary of the project. SIPOC is one of the best tools to determine the scope of a project. Example of a project scope. Let's revisit the problem statement that we had made for our process. The statement reads, high queue time is seen in 75% of the intervals in the customer service department. High queue time has a 60% impact on CSAT. This project needs to be started now to help improve CSAT. This statement has, the client VOC, a properly defined defect along with the department in which, at this stage, we understand that the defect is. Hence, we can, at this stage, define the scope as, all steps done in the customer service department are within scope and steps followed in other departments are out of scope. As the project progresses, we might have to revisit, change or refine this scope. The goal statement takes the following form. Increase or decrease the primary metric, from baseline to improved state, by a specific date, without negatively impacting the secondary metric. The primary metric is the metric being improved by the project. It is the CTQ which has to be improved. The secondary metric is the metric which must not be impacted while improving the primary metric. Typically, when efficiency is primary, its effectiveness will be secondary. Most importantly, the goal statement has to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic and time-bound. Example of a goal statement. We had closed the problem statement and scope as shown. Now, the goal statement can be written as, reduce the intervals with queue time more than 6 minutes from 75% to 15% by December 3, 2018 without increasing headcount. As you can see, this statement is a good example of a goal statement, because the desired and baseline states of the CTQ are mentioned, and both primary and secondary metrics are outlined. It also has SMART measures. Baseline is calculated by having historical data for the project Y or the primary CTQ. The amount of data required depends on the nature of the metric and the project. As a rule of thumb, 12 months historical data is used. However, if lesser is available, proceed with it if it is statistically significant. If historical data is not available, then the project should be paused till sufficient data is collected. Baseline is determined by doing a process capability study and determining long-term and short-term Z and DPMO. We will discuss these in detail in the module on Six Sigma tools. The team clearly lists the names of the project sponsor, project champion, the Six Sigma expert and the team members. The team structure and team roles are discussed in detail in our module Six Sigma roles. Project schedule. Enter the key project phase start dates. It is also a practice instead to specify the tollgate review dates. The tollgate review of one stage then forms the start date of the next stage. Business case. The business case outlines the financial, tangible benefits and the non-tangible benefits that will be achieved by the project. This pegs a dollar value to the project. The estimation of the cost savings or the revenues earned are done in terms of annualized figures.